This is a conversation with Jasmine Forsberg. She's an actor, singer, dancer, and songwriter who's currently one of the queens on Broadway as she plays Jane Seymour on the award-winning Six, the musical. She made a Broadway debut in the acclaimed Here Lies Love and just released her debut single, Do You. In this conversation, we discuss how she fell in love with musical theater, how that love has evolved over time, the challenges of working in theater and on Broadway, and then we talk about her process, Six, and Here Lies Love. This is no time. If you like what you see, then do hit subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, rate 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. This project takes a lot of my time, money, and efforts. If you'd like to see it continue, do consider making a donation on Patreon, Anchor. You can buy a gift on Instagram. You can join as a member on YouTube. You can buy super thanks on YouTube. If not through monetary channels, then do consider sharing these episodes, leaving your likes and comments. All forms of engagement, they really go a long way. For the forms of love and support, you can follow this channel on Instagram or Twitter, or follow me personally. And now, it's no time. When you were 6 years old, you went for your first show, The Lion King.
The Lion King.
The Lion King. For my first question, I want to step inside a time machine and go back in time to that day, that show. Can you paint the picture? What was going through your mind as you watched your first show? How did you feel in that moment?
I remember it was at the Bob Carr Performing Arts Center in Orlando, Florida. That's my where I grew up. And that particular theater has continental seating, meaning there are no aisles in the theater. It's just one giant sea of seats, bright red. And this theater actually isn't in use for touring productions anymore. That's the Dr. Phillips Center now in Orlando. But this theater, normally these giant elephants and puppets go straight through the audience and it's just like absolute magic. And because this is a sea of seats, we didn't necessarily have that experience. And yet I still somehow remember that, and it goes to show that memory is false because like I can see the elephants passing me in real time. But I think it's just because I fall in love with the show so much. The visuals, the puppetry, the beauty and the what is the word I'm looking for?
What is the word?
I don't know. I'm not positive in this moment. It's just so visually stunning. And as a little girl, there was so much stimulation at any given time. Anywhere you look, you're just absolutely enamored. And with the beauty, Julie Taymor directed this and just such, I don't know, it was just one of the most gorgeous shows. And this was before I had ever done my first show. And so I remember just being like, wow, can I do this? Is this a real thing? People do this for a living? I'm watching something and their job is to sing and dance and act. And at the time, I had already taken voice lessons and I had taken dance lessons since I was a little girl and taken piano lessons. So it was only a matter of time before storytelling became a part of the mix. And I think seeing The Lion King was that little oomph that was like, oh yeah, no, we're going to do that one day.
Let's do it. Let's talk about when you actually started doing it. I believe in that same year you joined community theater,
yes,
a Magic Curtain production of 101 Dalmatians. You just spoke about, and we're still looking for the right word, but you spoke about how it was so visually stimulating.
Yes.
And the grand spectacle that attracted.
Spectacle, that's the word.
Yes. 5 points.
5 points.
Crushing
5 points.
it.
Indeed.
Yeah. So you spoke about how that was so attractive. Now that you started performing, when you were on the opposite side, not in the audience, now you're in the stage, did that change the reasons why you first fell in love with it? Did you have a new perspective in musical theater now? Or do you think even being on stage, the fact that it was so visually stimulating and the spectacle that you were creating, that was the reason why you still in love with it?
I mean, a Broadway touring production in comparison to a community theater production, the visual stimulation probably is on a little bit of different ball games there. But I do think watching the show and falling in love with a Broadway production before doing one of my own was so informative for me as an actor, just because I knew, even as a little girl, I knew the power and the joy that watching live theater can bring to people. And so when I was on stage, there was always that part of me that was like, wow, I'm having fun. And I know that the people out there, I'm 7 years old singing in a puppy costume, but I know they're having fun too. And so there was definitely like the two loves interplayed with one another for sure. But I mean, being on stage, this production of 101 Dalmatians wasn't even community theater. It was called youth theater, meaning you pay to be a part of said production.
Yeah.
But I just remember my mom, we grew up very, very close to where this theater company was, Magic Curtain Productions. It was truly like across the street from my neighborhood. And when I was a little girl, I took ballet lessons very early on, and I did not like going to ballet class. It was one of those things where I was like, Mom, I don't want to go. I don't want to put the tights on. I don't want to put the leotard on. Yeah. But anytime rehearsals came up for a show, I was like, all right, let's go. We're doing it. I can't wait. I'm so excited. And that's when I knew that it wasn't just the singing. It wasn't just the dancing. It was all of it put together that was so special to me. And I'm so grateful that I found it. And I feel very fortunate too, because that North Star has been in my life since I was a little girl. Like, I don't know anything else. I played t-ball for 1 year. My nickname, the coach nicknamed me Speedy Gonzalez because I'm only 5'1", but I put in a hustle even as a little girl. But other than that, I mean, it was theater for me. I found it at such a young age, and I've never looked back, and I'm so grateful for it.
You found it at such a young age, you never looked back. Let's talk about it now. So present day. Mm-hmm. Nearly 20 years from the day you first joined community theater. Now you are one of the queens on Broadway. You've been on tour with Six for almost 2 years as well. Before that, you were a cast member of Here Lies Love. Your debut single released last month.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
We're all excited. I think earlier this year, you came across a picture of you watching The Lion King, I think when you were 12 years old. And upon seeing that picture, you told your mom that I'm doing everything I said I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Not many people get to say that. So now 20 years later, you just spoke about how when you first started performing community theater, it matched the singing, the dancing, the storytelling for you. Now 20 years later, now that you've seen so much, you've been a part of so many different productions, had so many different experiences, has that love evolved over time? Is there a different reason now that you love in musical theater? Of course, you've seen the insides of the business, the good, bad, and the ugly as well.
All of it.
All of
it.
Has that changed the reason, or do you think you're still attracted for the same childlike love that you had the first time?
My senior year of college was during the pandemic. And I remember having a chat with my class, my cohort of 12 students at Penn State University. Yeah. We had a chat with another Penn State alum at the time who had so many Broadway credits to his name. And he still said, Broadway is the same thing you're doing right now, just on a $20 million stage, or however big the budget of the production is. And it reminded me that I also read recently, slight tangent, a Tara Rubin quote. Tara Rubin is a wonderful, wonderful casting director in our industry. And she had said, remind yourself that you are always an artist, even if you are not currently employed as one. Mm-hmm. And as we know, this industry is so inconsistent. And it is a dream come true. And it is also one of those things where when I was on tour, I realized I am living my dreams, but I'm also actively aware of how much I'm sacrificing every day in order to live them, and being on tour, being away from family for the holidays, things like that. So it's interesting because there is such a duality to all of it, of being fully aware. I have those moments where I still to this day have those little pinch me moments on stage. And then there are of course other times where I'm like, oh, this feels a little more like a job today. My body isn't at 100 right now, but I still have to show up and do the best job that I can in the show. And that's all I can ask myself of is doing the best that I can in that particular moment. But as a bit of I definitely have some high standards for myself. So we're not going to get any lower than a certain bar. Otherwise, I'm just not gonna, it won't be acceptable. It won't be acceptable. But circling back to your question, it was about the differences of just, spanning 20 years of performing and whatnot.
Whether that love has evolved over time.
I would say it continues to exponentially grow. And as we age and gain wisdom and whatnot, it also becomes a little more complicated too, just because as I become more and more of an adult and be independent with more responsibilities, it isn't just fun. It's a passion, but it's also my livelihood at the same time. And so I recognize the wonderful position I'm in to be a part of a very successful long-running Broadway show that is Six. But when I did Here Lies Love, which was my Broadway debut last summer, dream come true, all Filipino cast, history making. But our show stayed open for 6 months. And the goal, of course, of any show, I think, is to, try and make it to the Tonys. But with the way that we opened in July of last year, we ended up closing back in November. And that's the sticky part of the business. That's the part that makes you remember it is show business. It isn't just fun and games. Even though on stage we have the best time and we're creating such meaningful art, there is also a component to it where it's like the show has to make money. And unfortunately, Here Lies Love was one of those productions that just couldn't find the right footing at the time. I think Broadway was ready for a show like that, absolutely, because it was so revolutionary. I think it was ready. I think there was just some steps that were not taken or could have been taken differently to position the show in a different light. But I'm so proud of that show. I am so proud of it. But it's one of those it comes with the territory of being in commercial musical theater.
There's a common saying, don't make your passion your profession. You just spoke about
Oopsies.
You just spoke about the challenges of this becoming like work. There are obviously, this industry in particular is quite physically and mentally exhausting. When you make this your career, there's obviously going to be the long hours, a lot of physical effort that goes in this. You mentioned there are some days where you just might not be in the right zone to do it. Mm-hmm. The industry you just spoke about, Here Lies Love, this industry is quite fickle as well. Things might end overnight. Mm-hmm. That might bring some stress and anxiety with it. Is this a challenge, like you have to keep balancing all the time, that there's a danger of these different externalities, the logistics of it, and these negative, which I guess is negative variables that come with any job, coming and corroding the magic or the love that you had for the industry in the first place?
It comes with many jobs, yes. This industry is one that I've had to actively remind myself that I've chosen this lifestyle. Yeah. And my father, when I was a little girl, cautioned me. He is a very practical man. I love him very dearly. And I respect his logic. But when I went to school, he was like, I would like you to major in musical theater and business. So you have options. Yeah. And that, unfortunately, based on some various timeline situations, pandemic, taking a leave of absence during school, it did not end up panning out for me that happened. Luckily, that has not had to be an issue in this moment.
So far.
So far, not gonna challenge. But it's one of those things that I've talked to friends about too, because like some people, their work they work so that they can live. And then I think the general American concept is that a lot of people live to work because we just love working so much. It takes up so much of our time. But it's interesting. I was talking to a friend who she's a data analyst, and she works so that she can have time to travel and like live her life and do other things. I don't necessarily have the luxury of taking time off whenever I want. It's very complicated. I would say Broadway and musical theater is a pretty greedy industry, in that they expect us to work on, maybe not on Thanksgiving, but we are working the day before, the day after. We are working perhaps on Christmas Eve, like things like that. And it's one of those things, I'm like, it comes with the territory to be able to live my dreams in the way that I live them. There are also sacrifices that I have to make. But it's interesting too. The conversation we were having where she was like, being a data analyst is my occupation, but I don't introduce myself by saying, hi, I'm Courtney, I'm a data analyst. I don't necessarily say, hi, I'm Jasmine, I'm an actor, but I do say, I'm Jasmine, I am an artist. Like that is a core part of who I am. And you can't take that away from me. You could take the actor away, but you can never take away that I, at my core, am an artist. It's who I am. It's part of my being. And so that's, I think, the difference of passion and profession. It's like, but it is me. That is who I am. And so it's trade-offs. There's trade-offs to everything.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. Let's talk about some of the good parts of the job. Can you paint a picture once again of what happens when you step on stage? How do you feel? I find it so interesting. There are so many performers who talk about going into this flow state or this zone where they completely switched off and they feel like they're not in control of their body and the body is just like a vessel. There are other performers who are on the other end of the spectrum who say that they're hyper alert, like they're completely in tune with every single thing and they can see and sense everything. Do any of these categories sound familiar to you? Do you resonate with any of them, or do you have a sweet spot somewhere in the middle?
I would say I fall in the middle. Okay. I had a professor at Penn State, Wendell Franklin, he was one of my acting professors, who said of 8 shows a week, you'd be lucky if 3 of those 8 shows you are truly dropped in. Dropped in meaning like you are in the moment. You were in that Zen flow state where you're just like, you are the character and it just happens. And you're living in that moment in that real time. But there are other moments. 6 is a unique example where we break the 4th wall the entire show. So the audience is a character in itself. When you see it, we're talking directly to them. We are advocating for ourselves as characters to them to try and win this competition that we've set up. And so that makes it a little bit different in that you can't necessarily take away the fact that you are living in modern day times talking to an audience that's right here because they are living in 2024 real time right now. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, when I get on stage, there are some things, there are some little rituals that really help me feel present and focused. I am a little bit superstitious, so I make sure to do them before every show. One of them is I will go on stage, and during Heart of Stone, my number, I stand on this spike, center stage, at a very specific depth of the stage. And so I go stand there before the house opens, and I just breathe, and I take a moment. I take 2 deep breaths. I look at the very exact spot in the audience that Henry technically is placed when I'm singing the song to Henry. And sometimes I'm channeling a very specific energy or word in that moment. I say word because that'll take me to the next ritual that I have. But other times, maybe I even say a prayer. There's a thing that I love to do. I used to wear this angel pin. When my grandpa passed away when I was 11 years old, my mom gifted me this angel pin that I would wear on like a bra strap or something like that, or even on my person at the time on my shirt. And the angel was a princess angel because my Lola would always call me his princess. I was the only granddaughter, so I had that princess treatment for sure. But it was just, as more loved ones in my life have passed away, that pin gained meaning. And actually the post of the pin broke off at one point, so I don't have the pin anymore, but I have this necklace that resembles the exact same thing. And since, I don't know, maybe the age of 14 or so, I would cross my heart 3 times before every show, during every prayer that I would do before a show. And the prayer is just something that is a moment for me to center myself and just have a moment of myself and this higher power, God, whatever you believe in, if you believe in something. And so this is something that is so grounding for me. And you'll see me, if I don't have a tattoo, but if I were to ever get one, I think I would probably get an angel or wings or something right here. Not the most ideal place for an actor because it's very revealing if you have a dress on or something, but it would mean something to me, which would be really, it would be really special. But that second thing, if I were to channel a word or something like that, it's because before every show, I share a dressing room with my castmate Storm Lever, and we have, between our dressing stations, we have this like wellness section where there's lots of good smelling things, there's essential oils, and there is this variety of decks of cards. So there are angel cards, which just has one word on it, things like inspiration, celebration, joy, discernment, things like that. Yeah. And then there are unicorn affirmation cards. There's a Louis K. Name TBD. I think it's Hay.
Okay.
But anyway, we'll fact check that one.
I don't want hate mail coming in.
But long story short, I pull cards and I take the time to sense them as though I'm charging the cards. So if I were to pick a Lego block here, this left side is calling to me, and it's specifically this one. Ooh, what do you know? It's a very tiny one. I don't know why. This is giving slip and slide right here. Is this telling me just go with the flow? Like start here and just use your inertia and go down. Long story short, the cards really help me find a beautiful thing to discover and /or focus on in that day. And I love when the universe
is giving you a sign.
Hey, Amtrak. I love when the universe gives me a card that is so in line with actually how I'm feeling that day, or is encouraging me to like get my act together. Yeah. Like let's say I'm in an unfortunate mood, and the word that is chosen ends up being like joy. Mm-hmm. It's like, Jazz, remember what you have. Be grateful for what you have. In those days where it feels a little bit more like work, remind yourself, like, you are living your dream. 6-year-old Jasmine, she would cry if she knew that you were doing what you're doing right now. She would be so happy. So yeah, little things like that.
I love it. You brought up superstition, you brought up a divine power, you brought up many interesting ideas, and multiple performers have pointed out that there have been moments on stage where they feel like the certain energy of sorts, or like a certain, I don't know the exact word for it as well, but where it feels like there's some form of a presence, or like the character they're playing has a presence of its own, or there's some different energy that takes hold of them, which is like this artistic energy that just takes hold and the body just becomes like a vessel. I'm assuming that you believe in that as well. Like this is something that's real and happens on stage.
I definitely think one of the most beautiful parts of live theater is that you can never get those moments back. When they happen, they happen.
Yeah.
And that's why I do have a little bit of a stronger opinion about bootlegs, because it's like, that's not the point of live theater, is to be present in the room, and what happens in that 1,000-seat theater or however big it is, it's meant for those people. And of course, there's different conversations to be had about accessibility of theater, because Broadway is so expensive, and I totally understand that. But that's the magic of live theater, is that when you're in the room, there is an energetic connection that we all share. I think the Lena Horne has 1,069 seats, if I'm correct. Yeah. Fact check me once again. And it's just so special to be able to share that experience with those people. And it makes every show different, because you never know really what you're going to get in each performance, just based on the energy alone.
I have a follow-up question for you on that.
Yeah.
So in a previous interview, you had mentioned that the Lena Horne Theatre is a much smaller theatre in comparison to a lot of theatres that you performed in while you were on tour. And as a result, you don't have to project as much. Whereas in other theatres out there, which are much bigger, you might have to maybe project more or exaggerate a bit more of your movements. I'm really fascinated about these things, because you're performing the same show, you're portraying the same character, but these things, these small factors like the layout of the theater, which is not something I would ever imagine, changes the performance in a certain way. I would assume maybe even the audience changes it. Have you been able to pinpoint what factors, what variables change the show so much so that if I were to watch the show today and maybe watch it again tomorrow, maybe in a different place, would it be a completely different experience for me?
I think absolutely. Honestly, and this show is so unique in that Six encourages you to bring so much of your own humanity into the roles that you play. Yeah. And so you might see the six of us play this particular role, do the show. But then in Chicago right now, the Berlin tour is playing for another 5 weeks or so, or 4 weeks at this point. And if you watch their cast in their company, it is completely different, because so much of the songs are the same, but the delivery and the human behind the delivery is just such a different experience, which I find very cool about this show. It is different, unlike other long writing shows like a Wicked, for example, where like they want Glinda to be Glinda, and you are going to know what you are going to see for the most part within reason when you watch that show. Yeah. So that is something that I love about being a part of Six. But I'm visualizing this specific theater. I forget exactly where we were playing, but we were in Columbus, Ohio, and I swear the back row was at least a football field away. Like they were so far. I think we were ants. I swear we were ants on stage. And it's actually kind of commonplace for some people in big touring houses to like bring binoculars. So you can, because my number, Heart of Stone, is a park and bark number. I stand in one spot on the stage and I deliver a song and I sing it. And it is unlike any other number in the show in that regard, because every other show has such spectacle to it. And there's a lot more dancing and a lot more just action going on. And so it's really, I think, important for me, and I have a responsibility as an actor to maintain, like, don't phone it in. Maintain that connection to the song as best as I possibly can at all times. Because if I'm not connected, how are they going to be connected, you know? And I find as an actor, it is so much more fulfilling. My job is so much more fun when I am in the moment and I'm dropped in. So I really try to be. And in those occasional performances where I'm just not feeling it, I don't go home and I'm not like disappointed with myself, but I'm like, okay, what can I do next time to make sure that I'm locked in? Because it means so much to me. Singing that song just for the past 2.5 years has truly taken on such a different meaning over the course of me being on this journey with the show, which is so beautiful. And I want to be able to share that story and that sense of healing with the audience as well. I say healing just because throughout the past 2.5 years, I've fallen in love for the first time. I experienced with this, Jane Seymour singing all about how this person is the only one she's truly loved before she passes away. And to be able to sing this song, having have loved and having lost that love, it has made the song gain so much meaning in my life. And the last 6 months have been a healing journey of my own. And so to sing that song and to finish the song saying, I am unbreakable, you can't break me, it's so powerful. And it is something that the universe works in mysterious ways. And I think in this particular era of my life, I was meant to be surrounded by 5 other extraordinarily empowered women who are so secure in who they are and what they bring to the table, that all that is in that space is warmth and love and support for one another. And that means a lot to me, to be able to walk into the space every day and just like be so happy to be at work. Because you don't get that all the time.
How's that changed your portrayal of Jane Seymour over the last 2 years? You just mentioned when you first took on the role, you were yet to fall in love. And now over the last 2.5 years, you've not just fallen in love, but you've also grown as a person. You've experienced more in life. If you were to compare your first portrayal of Jane Seymour and the portrayal now, has that also changed as you've grown as a person?
Yeah, I think in this Broadway iteration, I am so much more willing to be myself on stage, which sounds crazy because like it is a character. I am playing a character at the end of the day. Yeah. But I mean, when I auditioned for this show, Jane Seymour was perhaps one of the last queens I thought I'd be considered for, because in the character description that casting sent out in their breakdown, maybe the first word that is used is like matronly. And I was like, at the time, I was like, I'm 21 years old. Like I don't have a child. I know at the time, in the 1700s, probably so many 17-year-olds and 18 and 19, blah, 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 had children. But that's not my journey. That's not my life. And so I was so confused when I got the phone call that the role that they were offering me was Jane, because I went in for 4 of the 6 queens.
Yeah.
And I remember for a long time still trying to find the role. And the person who originated the role on Broadway, Abby Mueller, she and I are just such different types. And when I was encouraged and allowed to just play with goofiness and having fun on stage, I was like, oh, they're letting me play. They're letting me find this. And it's amazing that a role can be portrayed such different ways and it still resonates with people. That means it's just good writing, period. So Lucy Moss and Toby Marlowe did a phenomenal job writing this piece, for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned like this role was described as matronly, but over time, and you mentioned this in the previous interview, playing this role has also deepened your love for your own mother. How did that happen?
Oh my goodness. I mean, my mom, I love to say my mom is the most important person in my life. I look up to her so much. If you see a photo of us, we are spitting images of one another. I think my friend Gabi, one of my castmates actually, Gabi, said that the genes went copy paste because we are just so alike in so many ways. But I remember my parents have always encouraged, I have 2 older brothers. My parents always encouraged us to remain driven and go after our goals in life with full force. And when we left the nest, my mom, I recognize how privileged I was that my mom was able to, her job was to take care of us. And my father went to work every day and my mom stayed home. I did 5 years of virtual school. That would not have been possible if my mom was not there to supervise me through said virtual school. And virtual school was so I could do some acting down in Orlando when I was a child. And I remember me being the sassy 18-year-old ambitious little student that I was. I was like, Mom, we're all out of the nest now. Like we're out of the house. Like why don't you work again? Like just continuing to push her in that direction. And she eventually did. But I recognize through living in this role that having a healthy family, being a mom is perhaps the most important job you can do. But if being a mother is your calling, raising your children to be independent, that like you've done a good job. Like, and I have so much respect for my parents for giving my brothers and I the upbringing that we have had. With regards to playing Jane Seymour, I recognize that having a healthy, loving, strong household and family, that is such a beautiful goal. Your goal doesn't have to be, I want to be a fancy schmancy doctor who makes $1 million and saves a bunch of lives in the process. Yes. Or I want to be, an Oscar-winning actor. Like, it doesn't have to be that. Your goal can be, I would love to have a successful, healthy, beautiful family and a beautiful home. And like, that is just as important of a goal. And playing this role has helped me realize that familial love is one of the most important. For me, it is probably the most important thing in my life is my family and my connection to them. And the way that they have shown up for me in supporting my career, it just, they go hand in hand. Like, I wouldn't have the career and the love for theater that I have today without the support from my family. So I'm just so grateful for that.
So if you want to develop more gratitude for your family, just play Jane Seymour on Broadway. Great advice. Yeah, just do it. It's easy.
Just do it.
That's it. I have to ask you, we were talking about different theaters or the layout of theaters and how that changed the performance while you were on tour. What are other differences you've noticed? Because you're one of the few people who's actually played the same character on tour and then on Broadway as well. Have you noticed any other differences? The
location of where we are in the country definitely plays a role in how the show is received. Okay. Generally speaking, it's a very high energy show.
Yeah.
Also, the size of the theater plays a role into how the show is received, which is crazy to think about, but like 3,000, some of the houses we were playing were like 3,000 people, perhaps even bigger at times. A 3,000 seat theater with a full house, they take a lot longer to die down in their applause.
Okay.
And so, and it sounds so silly, but like, I really do mean it when I say like the applause could like go on forever and ever, which is amazing. And also, especially when like, for many people, this is the first time they're seeing the show on Broadway as well. First time seeing the show, but because Broadway's been running for so long, oftentimes people are returning customers or returning patrons who will come back and see the show. But for so many of these people, it was their first time watching a show like this. And if they really resonated with a number and they wanted to keep applauding, it takes a lot longer for 3,000 people to die down than it does. Like, it is like wall of sound energy versus the Lawania Horn is the smallest house we've played ever as a company, which is really cool because as you mentioned, like, I don't have to, oftentimes on tour, we were encouraged, get to the back of the house, project, send your energy to that last row that is a football field away. And in the Lawania Horn, they're there with us. Like we don't have to reach as hard. I'm not saying we're not giving a show-stopping performance, but it's not nearly as energetically taxing.
Mm-hmm.
So that feels, I think it's a little more sustainable doing the show in one place rather than being on the road, honestly. Though being on the road with the cast that I'm currently playing with on Broadway, it made us so close, and I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. Absolutely anything. We played in Chicago for 4 months, and I lived with my grandparents at the time because I'm originally from Chicago. Orlando's home for me, but Chicago was where I was born, and I lived there for 5 years or so. And I wouldn't trade that experience for the world. My mother is my most important person in my life, but anybody knows my grandparents are my favorite people in my life, and they know that as well. And so, like, when am I ever going to get an opportunity to just live with them for 4 months? I don't know. I'm not sure. So I'm very, very happy that I had that chance.
Happy you had that chance. And I love it. I would have never thought that the length of the applause would also make such a big difference.
Isn't that
right?
funny?
Yeah.
But like our show like would be usually like a clean 84 minutes or something like that. Very short show. But there would be the occasional like 86-minute show or 88-minute show, or just like, because they're responsive, they're laughing more, the applause is longer. It's interesting, just like how inconsistent it can be.
Yeah, the timing can be completely different. I get it. Okay, I have to ask you about Here Lies Love as well, Broadway's first all Filipino cast. What was that experience like for you? Was there a difference in maybe you getting more personally invested in the story and the characters itself because you have that connection? Was it harder for you to detach from the story? Was that something you were trying to do as well? Were you approaching as a completely independent production and did not make a difference to you? What was that experience for you?
Well, the experience as a whole was truly life-changing because I don't think Broadway has ever seen a show like Here Lies Love before.
Yeah.
I mean, at the Broadway theater, just from a physical
I know the word.
visuals perspective alone, they ripped out the entire orchestra of the Broadway theater. They ripped out the seats and created, David Corns, our scenic designer, Tony-nominated scenic designer, that is. He created a nightclub on Broadway. It was just phenomenal. And in that sense, it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. So, and it was also, you would have moments where you're on the dance floor stage and then you have to go up to the satellite stage all the way up here in a matter of like 30 seconds. Like there are videos of us running backstage, which is not the safest thing given the working conditions and the darkness of a Broadway house. But we did it. We made it happen because we do it for the love of theater and the love of storytelling. But with regard to the Filipino culture of it all, I mean, there are so many opportunities. Lies. There are actually only so many opportunities to portray an Asian story on stage, but it's just that. Normally it's like an Asian story, or it's like The King and I, and if you're Asian, you'll generally speaking be considered for that track, that role, that production. What made Here Lies Love so special, for the first time, it was a Filipino story. It was so specific that I don't know, in my life, I've never seen a production that was not just all Filipino company members, but it was a Filipino story. It was our story that we were telling, and every single night. And to watch people who, this particular government overthrow happened 40 years ago. People in the company were children of martial law. They were martial law babies who fled the Philippines and eventually made their way to America. Like, this is such a timely story to be telling about democracy and the threat of democracy, especially given that the Marcos's child, Bongbong, was elected as the president after something like this had already happened in the country. And so it's just very interesting to see how democracy plays a role in a very telling and timely and meaningful role in a American Broadway show.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially given that this year is an election year too. It's just so fascinating. And I wish that the show could have stayed open long enough for a lot of these conversations to be happening with regards to, how the election will go at some point later this year too. So just fascinating stuff about how all of these meaningful conversations interplay with one another. Like, theater is so important. And the fact that we get to watch it as entertainment, but then go home and be like, oh, how does this actually resonate with all of these other facets of my life? Very interesting, very interesting. And just makes you think. And that's one of the most powerful things about storytelling.
I believe when the show came to a close, I think it was one of the directors who said this is not the end, but it's the beginning. And I agree. Like, when you look back on this show, I'm sure it'll be looked back fondly. We are approaching the end of the hour, so I have to squeeze in one final big question.
But of course.
Then we start wrapping up. You're someone who's the definition of making it on Broadway. You're one of the queens on Broadway. So for other people who aspire to perform on Broadway, what advice can you give them? What skills they should work on? How do they prepare themselves mentally? How do they prepare for an audition? What hacks do you have for them?
I brought him up before. One of my professors at Penn State, I don't think this is a him quote per se, but he's the one I remember telling me. He said, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. As an actor, it is our job to constantly be flexing those muscles. I mean, during the pandemic, many people were not auditioning for anything, or they weren't necessarily practicing that craft because there were such limited opportunities to do so. But auditioning is a skill. Just like you go into dance class. I'm not saying take an audition class, but going into an audition is a skill in itself. And memorizing, I remember recently I've been getting a little bit of an uptick in self-tape appointments. And I've been actually very impressed with my ability to retain sides as somebody who, like, when you're in a contract for a long time, you're not always auditioning constantly for other things. And so flexing that muscle again, I was like, oh, wow, like I needed to work it out, but now she's strong again. We're chilling. We're all good. there was something else that I wanted to mention. It might come back to me. But yes, actually, I remember talking to one of my friends who is in casting at Tara Rubin Casting. And I asked him, like, what is something that us actors don't know about with regards to what you do as a casting director? And he had said, the amount of bookkeeping that happens in this job is just, they take notes on everything. If you're getting to the final callback for something and you don't get it, you are automatically put on this short list and you're on the radar for all these other projects that are within the same vein of whatever that project was. So long story short, your audition for this thing, it might not go your way for this thing, but that doesn't mean that 2, 3, 4 projects down the road, you don't immediately get put into that pile because you did such incredible work on this particular work, on this material. And it just is a nice reminder that every audition is an audition. It's an audition for your entire career type of thing. So just and that's not even to put pressure on it. It's more so to open up your possibilities of like, if it's not this thing, it is the next. And to know that people are rooting for you, which is, it always feels good to know that you have teammates in the room, not opponents.
That's great advice. Before we move into our closing questions, I would love it if you can interpret what masterpieces have been built with the Lego. So what have you built?
Well.
And what have I built?
Well. If this one could stay upright, maybe it can.
Maybe it's not meant to.
Is it not meant to, or can I stack this one? Am I ruining your creation? I ruined your creation. Shalaj, I'm sorry.
My masterpiece.
Well, this one is giving, I was watching a video on skyscrapers that are currently being pinned to be built in New York City.
Yeah.
This is definitely giving New York City skyscraper, with us being in Manhattan and all. And these are giving chimneys. This one has an eyeball on it. I think I talked earlier about North Star. I think this house is just saying, this is my house of cards, like this is my home, and my eye is always to that North Star, and I'm going to follow it.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Curtly, can't top that. One of the future skyscrapers and your house of cards with the North Star and you looking up at the sky and the heavens above. Art.
Mwah.
Amazing. Final questions. What are some books, movies, role models that have strongly influenced you? Recommendations?
There's one book that comes to the top of my head, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, I believe is his name. It's all about your personal legend and finding that personal legend, knowing that the universe will conspire to help you achieve that. Yeah. It's about your destiny. It's about that North Star. Mm-hmm. I deeply resonate with that book. I read it for the first time back in December, and in talking about it now, maybe I'll give it a reread. It was that powerful and meaningful for me. So that's the one for sure that comes to top of mind.
Movie?
I don't know if I have one, Shalaj. I don't know.
There has to be one.
Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
Yeah.
Yeah. Changed my life, actually. I sobbed after that movie. I was so deeply affected by it. I thought it was beautiful. So that one.
And role models?
I'm going to give a shout out to my ate Leia Salonga. I worked with her in Here Lies Love. And she, as a little girl, there were not many Filipina actors that I could look up to. Oftentimes I was called a little Leia Salonga. And I think honestly, that's because my peers and even my Filipino family, like she was the icon. She was it. There weren't many other people to idolize in that way. And I just look up to her so much, and getting to work with her on Here Lies Love was such a joy. People say don't meet your heroes. Yeah. They kind of, like you mentioned earlier, passion and profession. I disagree. I say absolutely meet them, because they're humans just like us. As long as you can humanize them and make, just be a friend to them, and they'll be a friend to you. It's just, I have a lot of respect for Ate Leia.
Shout out to her. I'm sure she's watching. Which is the greatest Broadway show of all time? No bias. Let's say 6 aside. Here Lies Love aside.
I'll speak because I felt so artistically. My love for theater never went anywhere, but after watching Hadestown back in 2021, I saw the original Broadway company. That show just left me so re-inspired and reinvigorated. Like I said, my love for theater never went anywhere, and I still walked out of that theater being so deeply moved. So, Hadestown.
I completely agree. Hadestown is my favorite as
Really?
well. Yeah.
Let's go.
We started this conversation by visiting 6-year-old Jasmine. So let's visit her one final time. If you could tell her one thing, you give her some piece of advice, and not just her, but kids like her who dream a dream as magical as yours, what would you tell them?
There will be many people who are going to try and label you and put you in a box and categorize you. The least you can do is free yourself of that burden and trust that any avenue you want to go down is going to be open to you. Your options are limitless. The world is your oyster.
World is your oyster. As your professor used to say, have something to say.
Have something to say.
What would you like your legacy to be?
I want to write and originate my own show. And I would like to be seen as an artist who advocates for the people and communities in life that are meaningful to her and important to the world. And I hope to be able to infuse all of that into perhaps one beautiful show that I get to write in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. TBD on that. Haven't started yet, but I love to say my dream role hasn't been written yet, because if it's my dream, I will be the one to create it. So we shall see. We shall see. Miss Shayna Taub, who just won several Tonys very recently, starred in the show that she wrote. And I think that's pretty badass. So yeah.
Fingers crossed. As someone who seriously entertained the idea of becoming a doctor, I'm happy you're down this path now. And I hope it happens. Final question. What is the meaning of life, Jasmine Forsberg?
The meaning of life is finding your version of happiness and pursuing that with full force, always.
I love it. Yeah. Find your happiness.
Yes.
I can get behind that meaning.
Find your joy.
Find your joy. Jasmine, if people want to connect with you, find out what you're up to, watch you on stage, where can they go? How can they find you?
Shout out to Six the Musical. Come see us at the Lena Horn. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, come through at Jasmine_Forsberg.
That's the place to find you. Jasmine, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so much, Shalaj. Thanks for having me.